G-Man Boxing. Do you know what I mean? Every single live he donates. I see him on other lives donating. He's got the bag on it.
Alright people, PBC announced their spring and summer schedule with Showtime today. Now, I talked about this briefly in Review of the Week. I actually thought it was going to be later on in the day, UK time. I actually thought it was going to be probably closer to 6 or so, but they announced it there in the last few hours. And they've done this pretty much since 2020, where they've just announced a kind of, say, a period of 3 months. These are the fights that's going to happen. These are the ones specific that's going to be on pay-per-view. These are the ones going to be on standard Showtime. I have to say that the Showtime schedule, they still do Fox. You know, a lot of shows do take place on Fox with PBC. But for the most part, Showtime tend to have the better fights. They tend to get the more star-studded fights, the star-studded names. I get the impression that maybe PBC are looking to just kind of stick with Showtime specifically, and maybe Fox is kind of there almost as just kind of as almost as a backup or a reserve. You know, they tend to put the kind of shows that you wouldn't be as hyped for on Fox, and the main ones tend to go on Showtime for the most part anyway. So let's have a look at the schedule. Obviously, first and foremost, we have Tszyu on March the 26th. He's fighting Terrell, Gausha. That's our Gausha. Probably butchering the name as I always do. That's what I'm known for. But Tszyu, this will probably be the first time I'll ever be able to do a proper review of his fight, like watching it there live. It's on March 26th, because normally he fights in Australia. Normally he fights during the week as well, during working hours, which is not ideal if you're trying to A, watch it, and B, do a review and kind of give a critique on his, performance. But Tszyu, he is knocking on the doors of Brian Castano and Jamel Charlo, I should say, who we'll talk about briefly now in a wee bit. And he's been looking impressive, very impressive. This is probably going to be the trickiest opponent per se in terms of, Gausha, he's kind of fringe world level, but he can do kind of the basics quite well. He can do a bit of everything in there. He's not, I wouldn't be picking him, put it like that, but he's certainly a step up from the Jeff Horns, the Dennis Hogans of the world. And I think Tszyu will shine. He's really, really been a very impressive fighter, and I think he's only improving. And I think, again, he's knocking on the door at world level. We have Erickson Lubin versus Sebastian Fundora. That's an interesting little one. It's for the WBC, it's for the interim WBC super welterweight world title. So I would imagine they'd be made mandatory for the winner of Charlo versus Castano. I reckon those belts are going to get fractured regardless of who wins it, because there's already mandatories, I think, with the WBO, with the IBF, and there will be an interim title, so I'd imagine that will get called sooner or later. So this is the problem with Undisputed. There's always mandatories. This fight itself, Lubin versus Fundora. I mean, if this was a fight just purely on boxing, Erickson Lubin wins this fight. He wins this fight, in my opinion. Problem with Erickson Lubin, there is a big problem with Erickson Lubin. I mean, he can do pretty much everything quite well. Can box very well. He's got respectable power there, definitely. Biggest problem with Lubin is he has absolutely no chin. And we've seen him hurt by much lesser punchers as well. Fundora is not a massive puncher, but he's just so unbelievably big for the weight. Like, he's about 6'5", 6'6" for 154 pounds. That's unheard of. I did think in his last fight against Garcia he lost. Interestingly enough, actually, Sergio Garcia is going to fight Tony Harrison. There's another fighter at 154 who's a very, very good boxer, very good fighter is Tony Harrison, but again, he's got no chin. At 154, it's an interesting one, because you've got 3 very good fighters in J-Rock, Lubin and Harrison. All have their own strengths, all are very good fighters, but the 3 of them, none of them can take a shot. Like literally none of them have any punch resistance at all. And Lubin, I just don't trust his chin. Like, if Lubin had a good chin, he'd beat Fundora. Fundora, he's just big. That's it. Like, he's nothing else really going for him. If Lubin had a chin, he'd beat Fundora. But I just don't trust his chin. I just do not. I just don't trust it. If someone's got any way decent power, I just don't trust his chin. Moving on to the next card, one I'm looking forward to actually quite a bit, is Errol Spence versus Ugas Welterweight unification. Errol Spence obviously has 2 titles, WBC, IBF. Yordenis Ugas, coming off a win over Manny Pacquiao, has the WBA. Now, Yordenis Ugas has been more active than Errol Spence. Errol Spence last fought in November of 2020 against Danny Garcia, and prior to that, his last fight prior was in 2019 against Sean Porter. Obviously, he had the car crash in October 2019, so he was out of action for over a year, and he would have been out of action for over a year regardless of what happened, in 2020. We all know he would have been out of action for the same amount of time, I would imagine. In fact, I'm actually surprised he came back as quick as he did, because judging by how violent, as I said several times, it was, I was surprised he even came back against Danny Garcia, because Garcia is still a world level opponent, and he really put it on Danny Garcia, put him in his place. But he was meant to face Pacquiao, and Yordenis Ugas was meant to be on that undercard back in August, and obviously Spence had that eye injury. It wasn't attached retina, I can't remember exactly what it was now, but it was an eye injury. They're always a bit of a worry when you have an eye injury, because they can tend to kind of flare back up again. So a fully fit, firing all cylinders Errol Spence, he beats Yordenis Ugas on points. I don't know what kind of Spence we're going to get. I really don't. The inactivity, the years prior to that of not living the lifestyle, obviously going into the car crash, he was fluctuating between fights. He was turning up drunk to press conferences. At some point that will catch up with you. Will it happen in this fight? I don't know. I will pick Errol Spence, but I know Yordenis Ugas is an excellent boxer. He's a habit of landing that right hand on southpaws, very effectively, very accurate with it. I will pick Errol Spence to win this fight, but I wouldn't be shocked if I'm certainly not seeing Errol Spence blowing Yordenis Ugas over. I'm not seeing that. If anyone's thinking Spence is going to go in there and just walk through Ugas, I don't see that happening at all. Next fight is in the month of May, and it's a very good fight. Charlo, Castano 2. Hopefully this time we will get a winner, a clear winner. I felt Castano won the first fight. It's going to be on neutral grounds. I think it's in Los Angeles. The more I think about this fight, I know I said on Sunday Castano's going to win it, but the more I look at it, the more I think about it, I think Castano put everything into that fight. And I don't think there's much more to come out of him, but I do think Jamel can bring a little bit more. And for that reason, I'm actually going to backtrack, and I'm going to go with Charlo to win this fight, become undisputed. And what Jamel is doing is fantastic. The wins he's picking up, the resume he's getting for himself. I'll talk now in a sec why he's putting his twin brother to shame. But on the undercard as well is Ennis Boots, and he's fighting Gusty Clayton, I think is how you pronounce it. Again, apologies if I'm butchering that name. I do know him. He is a good technical boxer, a bit awkward, and Ennis needs that. He does. He'd fought Van der Haar in December 2020, and that was on 3 weeks' notice, because it was actually, I forget who the original opponent was, but there was an opponent he was meant to fight, and it was behind closed doors. So different situation altogether to what we have. Obviously last year he had, I can't even remember who did Ennis fight last year, and I actually seen both his fights, and the names are actually escaping me, but I'll wait there a sec, because I seen both fights but I can't remember. Oh yeah, Delorme knocked out in the round, and the Lipin Yates fight. The Lipin Yates fight I was very impressed with. Very impressed with him in the Lipin Yates fight. Looked very good, really put it on Lipin Yates, and that fight, the Lipin Yates fight, was behind closed doors. And really in that fight, you could just hear the thuds that Boots Ennis, the shots that he was throwing were landing. They were so loud. Boots Ennis, tremendous puncher, great athlete, and his defense can be a bit meh at times, but I think once he's in there with someone who's able to properly tag him, and I don't mean tag him as in knock him out or anything like that, but once he feels a few shots going through and he knows, okay, this is not going to be as easy, I think then we'll start to see him maybe get his finger out and really work on and show that he actually show that he has a better defense, because I think he does. Very impressed with Boots Ennis. May 21st then, the week after, David Benavidez versus David Lemieux. Lemieux, former champion, down at 160 pounds. Has Lemieux actually lost since the Billy Joe Saunders fight? I don't actually think he has. Has he lost since he fought Billy Joe Saunders? He has not. But since then, obviously, he had 2 fights at middleweight. He knocked out Spike O'Sullivan in a round, and he fought Kareem Anchor, went to points with him, missed weight in that fight actually. But since then, he had a split decision in his debut at 168 pounds, and he was dropped twice in that fight. He had a knockout against the guy Francis Nutu, who I've never heard of. He's not been looking amazing at 168 pounds, it has to be said. And Lemieux's features don't. The way Lemieux is the body dimensions. He's not really a 168 pounder in that regard. He is too big for middleweight, but his attributes certainly are better at middleweight. He can punch, but I think he's seen better days. I think he's seen much better days over the last few years, and I expect him to get dealt with fairly decisively by Benavidez. There was talk of Benavidez possibly fighting Caleb Plant. That obviously didn't happen. Caleb Plant, there was talk of him fighting Terrell. I reckon that we'll see that probably in the summer, probably July or August. I'd say he needs a bit more time following the Canelo fight just to recuperate. But I'd like to see Benavidez versus Plant at some stage in the winter or autumn. I think that's a good fight. I'd pick Plant, or not Plant, I wouldn't pick Plant to win. I'd pick Benavidez to win. But Plant definitely showed. I expect him to get lit up against Canelo. He did a lot better than I thought. So that could be interesting. We have our next pay-per-view card here. Gervonta Tank Davis versus Rolando Romero. Rolly. I've got... there's two things. I'm in kind of two minds about this fight. There's the cynical part of me, which is saying this is a step down from Isaac Cruz. You know, Rolly is entertaining. He's got a fun style to watch. But it's a step down from Isaac Cruz. And then the other part of me is... How do I say it in a nice way? And this is not me hating on Rolly, but I'm someone who loves knockouts. I love seeing big knockouts, and I think that we are guaranteed a knockout, and we're guaranteed an entertaining fight in this fight, and an entertaining build-up at that. They're both colourful characters, they're both loud. Tank Davis is a good fighter, he's a very good fighter. Rolly is very crude, comes forward, there's no real defence. Yeah, you can punch a bit, but he is just going to be cannon fodder. I mean, like, he couldn't have got a better style for Tank Davis to look good against than Rolly. And I just can't see anything other than a devastating Tank Davis knockout. I can see it being fun for however many rounds it goes. I can see the build-up being fun again. It's in Bartley's in Brooklyn. But I can't see anything other than a Tank Davis devastating knockout. And as I've said several times, I love knockouts. Then we're into the month of June. Stephen Fulton versus Danny Roman. Correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't Danny Roman fighting on DAZN? Wasn't he signed with Hearn at one stage? He'd fights with MJ. He'd fights with TJ Dehaney. I think he might have had another fight on DAZN. But he's fighting Stephen Fulton. This for WBO, WBC Super Bantamweight World Title. Stephen Fulton just... Last year, his fight against Figueroa was good. Another fight as well in there. Now I can't quite remember the guy's name, but I remember Fulton just really impressed me with his talent in the ring. He's not the biggest puncher in the world, but I think Danny Roman's style will gel beautifully with Fulton. I really do. I think his style will mix very, very well with him. And Stephen Fulton is going to go on. I think he's got a lot of... What's the word? Momentum. He's got a lot of momentum going on now, and I think that this year we're really going to see Stephen Fulton make a stamp on the Super Bantamweight division. A really interesting fight I'd like to see. I don't think we'll see it. Will be Inoue moving up from 118, because he talked about that in the past, to fight Stephen Fulton. I think that'd be a fantastic fight. You've the boxer versus puncher. That would be brilliant. I'd love that fight. Now, this next fight I'm not happy with at all. I understand why it's happening, but Jamal Charlo at 160 pounds is just going to fight Selecki. Selecki went the distance with Danny Jacobs back in 2018. Looked alright in that fight, to be fair, but was still down in the 12th round. Jacobs won it. You know, he had moments in that fight, but Jacobs was the clear winner. And then he obviously fought Demetrius Andre in 2019, I think it was, and he soundly beaten, soundly outboxed by Demetrius Andre. He's not a world level fighter. He's never looked a world level. He's always looked a fringe world level fighter. And Charlo, I get why he's happening, because that June the 18th day, as we talked about on Sunday, was set for Munguia. I believe it was Team Munguia, not Munguia himself, but kind of probably Golden Boy end, who had an issue with maybe the broadcast. I think it was what they were saying. So they obviously had to fumble around to get him an opponent. But I guess maybe it's just me being cynical, but like I just wonder, could they have got someone better than Selecki? You know, I wonder, was there anyone better than Selecki? And bear in mind, a month prior, his brother's going to be fighting for Undisputed. You know, Charlo at 160 hasn't really set the world alight. I mean, there was a lot made of him because there was a lot of momentum around Charlo. Jamal, anyway, when he moved up to 160, because he had a very good run, well, a decent run at 154 pound, looked quite good. He certainly, from my eyes, hasn't carried the power that he had at 154 up to 160. He certainly hasn't. And the talk of him going to 168, I don't see him transitioning well into that weight, personally. I think 160 is kind of his ideal weight division, but I really don't see him translating. It could be wrong, but I don't see him translating to 168. And then finally, July the 9th, they've really gone ahead. I actually thought it was only the June, didn't realize it was July. Mark Magsayo, Ray Vargas, WBC featherweight world title. First defense since Mark Magsayo, I should say, won off Gary Russell Jr. earlier this year. A good performance against Gary Russell Jr., played by an injury, was Russell, and a long 2 years nearly of inactivity, nearly 2 years. Magsayo showed that he is a good little fighter. Ray Vargas is tricky, can be a bit awkward with the way he throws shots. There was a lot of hype around Ray Vargas back a couple of years ago before he won his title down at Super Bantamweight. He actually beat Gavin McDonald that was on a Matchroom show in Sheffield, I think it was. Was it Sheffield? It was in somewhere around there, but it started 2017. Now, Ray Vargas went into that fight with a reputation of being a bit of a puncher. He's not had a knockout since 2016. All of his fights gone the distance. And he was, I don't know if he still is, but I would imagine not if he's fighting on PBC. But he was promoted by De La Hoya and Golden Boy. Magsayo is looking good, and I think that he'll need to be on his game because Ray Vargas is no pushover. But I'll definitely be picking Magsayo to beat Ray Vargas. I just think that Ray Vargas has kind of stagnate, maybe the word, because even at 122, even at 122, his run as champion was just unremarkable. A bit like Zurdo Ramirez at 168, although he fought Jesse Hart. It was just kind of, you're a champion, but you're just kind of there. You know, you're just there. That's it. But that's the end of the card. That's the end of the schedule. I would say, look, it's not as good in terms of some of the other schedules the PPC have released, but it's certainly not a bad one. I mean, like, Fulton Roman, I'll watch that. I like that fight. Tank Davis versus Rowley. From an entertainment point of view, yes. Lubin versus Fundora. It's a weird one, but I will watch that because I think it could be an entertaining fight, and it's a good fight. You know, on paper it's a good fight. Just Lubin's chin, you know, I don't trust that chin. Castano Charlo, don't need to say any more about that. Spence versus Ugas, yes, I like that fight. It's a very good fight. Benavidez versus Lemieux, meh. You know, it's just it's alright. It's alright. You know, Lemieux can certainly carry power, but that's it, really. In terms of the rest, yeah, they are what they are. I'm quite happy enough with it. There's only 2 pay-per-views as well on it, so it's not, well, we wouldn't probably get them pay-per-view over here, but in the States I know they charge crazy amounts for pay-per-views. It's absolutely ridiculous the amount they charge for pay-per-views over there. Madness. But that's my thoughts on that. Let me know your thoughts on the schedule below. I hope you enjoyed the video, lads and lassies. If you could, smash the like button. Someone told me I should say that more at the start of a video. I never think to do it. I always think to do it at the end. Ayo. But maybe missing subs. Hopefully not. We're getting close to 7k, lads. We're close there. We're getting there. For now, lads, I'll leave you with that. Let me know your thoughts on this schedule in the comment section. Smash the like if you enjoyed it. Hit the notification bell. For now, I'll talk to you. Peace.